Welcome to our presentation of the Marklin New Items for 2021 in Z-Scale. We're going to do this by simply paging through the catalog, and I'll point out some of the interesting new items for you and hopefully give you a little bit of background information here and there. The catalog starts off with the MHI items, the Marklin Dealer Initiative items that we as a brick and mortar store are allowed to sell to you. So they're somewhat of a special edition items. And this year's subject is the railroad maintenance. So they come out with this 87761, the railroad maintenance car set. And it's a great little set with 5 cars. It has these 2 cars that can haul passengers. And what the Bundesbahn did is they used old passenger cars and then repainted them in this bluish green color to indicate that they were maintenance cars. A little freight car, a car with ballast, and then a flat car. And with this little set, you get 10 pieces of track as well. Then here on the bottom, you can see how they imagined you compose this train together with the locomotive and also the crane car set. The locomotive is a 212 in the typical DB colors. They had tonloads of these diesels. You can also use these diesels in many other applications. It does not just have to be used for this railroad maintenance train. And then we also have the crane car set consisting of 3 cars. You can actually work this little crane even though it is Z-scale. So that's pretty funny. And all these 3 items, the 5 car set, the locomotive, and then the crane car set, make up for the MHI items, the exclusive items for this year. Then the Insider locomotive, and I'll jump down 1 page right here, is going to be the V188. And for that Insider locomotive, they made these 2 car sets, I should say. And they are both in Era 3. This tank car set with 3 different little tanks, Hoban and Thurl and Ava. And then these sliding roof car sets. In reality, these cars, the roof could move open and the sidewalls could open as well. Not here in this Z-scale. But it's interesting to note that this is brand new tooling. And this is how these cars would look in Era 3, about the 1963 timeframe. Now it says these are great for the Insider model, but that does not mean that you cannot use them for different trains. They are widely used in Era 3. Then the Insider model, you can only get this model if you are an Insider member, which we, of course, highly recommend you would become, is the V188. This particular double diesel, they had 4 of them, I believe, was in use in World War II. They used them to pull those mega large cannons across Germany and also into Holland. After the war, one of these trains, one of these double locomotive sets was actually left in Holland. So this is our Insider model done in the Era 3B with the Maybach, the stronger motors, small details like roof extensions, sandboxes, and then the 2 car sets that we discussed earlier go really well with this train. The Braun Series. It started 2 years ago. Braun's handmade models, all very limited editions, unpainted, except they put a clear coat on them to protect them. Little masterpieces and great for our collectors. In the Braun series, we'll see a livestock car this year. And then the famous V200 Diesel, which is a very famous model for the Deutsche Bundesbahn, but also for Marklin. A lot of us remember in HO scale, back in the 60s, we all probably had a V200 in our collection. This is still the early lettering, so it has the Deutsche Bundesbahn as lettering on the side. And the motor is the new bell-shaped motor. Here you see the previous editions. The crocodile, at the time that we make this video, we still have it at our store, but it's long sold out at Marklin. The Class 85 was last year's model, and because the whole mess with production delays with COVID, it has yet to be delivered, but hopefully will be delivered soon. And then the Dresden Boxcar and the refrigerator car as the cars from the previous years. Beautiful models, like I said, all handmade and high quality in bronze and great collector's items. Then we start with the early electric locomotives. This is era 2. This is just prior World War II, so we're talking maybe 1938 or 39. And Germany more or less was in a race to have electric trains running across the country. And this was their first attempt from, I believe it was the first attempt to run it all the way from Berlin to München. It consists of this beautiful gray E18, which at that time was one of the fastest electric locomotives, and then a set of 4 passenger cars and a Mitropa car. A nice set of 3 hinged roof hatch cars. These darn little hatches actually open if your fingers are small enough, I guess, to be able to open them up. And then they have a little freight car set with the fun addition of this Tempo A400 delivery vehicle. This is all still era 2. And then we move up slightly to era 3. These cars are great because, first of all, you can buy them now by the piece. So you can see every car has its own number. This is a second class car, another second class car, and then a second, third class car, and the freight or the baggage car, I should say. You can buy them all separately. Early era 3, you can see there's no logos yet or very limited lettering, which is typical for the early era 3 cars. Different car numbers, and in use widely throughout Germany during that time. So you can hang these behind many different locomotives. Very good to have in your collection. A suitable locomotive would be the 88 744, which is your famous Bubikopf, the BR64. Again, done in the early era 3, so you don't see a big DB logo. I think right here you actually see a DB logo, but this one will not have the large more modern DB logo. Early era 3, perfect to add on to these cars, the Thunderbox cars, Donnerbuchsen. We jump back to the E18, but now a more modern version, post-war era 3 in that steel blue color livery with the, you can see it here, it's like an almost silver gray stripe, very typical color for early era 3 at the German railroads. And then they come out with the coal loading set, little coal car with a power shovel in blue, a nice little add-on accessory to this car. This tiny locomotive, the Class V36, is one of the museum series. Marklin is doing one museum locomotive now every year. This year it was time for a diesel, and this locomotive is in the Deutsche Bundesbahn Museum, the Traffic Museum in Nuremberg. And limited to 499 pieces, and comes in one of these nice little wooden cases. For you collectors, a good item to look at. This locomotive is still in use, of course, only on small little trips for the museum. It's a tiny locomotive. Then we go up to era 4, and we're looking at a car transport car. This is not one of those cars for factories. It's actually one that would run in a passenger train to transport the cars for people who are on the train. We don't have it at all here in the US, but in Germany, it used to be common for travel to take the train and put your car up on the transporter, and your car would come along with you on your long trip. Then all new tooling here is for this sliding roof, sliding wall car set. Earlier we saw it in more or less silver and brown in the Era 3 version. This is a more modern version, Era 4. And on purpose they made it look very used with all kinds of different road labels and old labels and markings on these cars. Era 4, lots of repair areas. You see that here in the detail. And all new tooling. A good locomotive to pull these is the Class 42. The Class 42 is essentially nothing else than a Class 41 locomotive, but now powered by oil, so it has an oil tender instead of coal. So the Germans renamed it from a Series 41, a BR41, to a BR42, indicating it was now powered by oil. You see a beautiful picture here, and I really like this picture of the crew in front of a BR42. Highly detailed, beautiful steam locomotive. We're moving up. Still Era 4 here, but the Class 220, the former V200 locomotives, very well known, very popular locomotive. And the Deutsche Weinstrasse, excuse me. Last year we had the couple or the pair of Weinstrasse cars, but we really didn't have a good locomotive to pull it. And now they came out with this set, the Deutsche Weinstrasse set. It has a prototypical BR218, that's what would pull it, a diesel locomotive, because a lot of these smaller lines would not be electrified. And then the Weinstrasse cars, and you can combine, if you have the 87073 on order, it would combine great with this set, the Deutsche Weinstrasse set. Then we have another Thunderboxen car set, but this is Era 4 version. And now you can see they have markings for the DR, Deutsche Reich. And a good locomotive to pull, you'd think that's a BR24, but since it's the Deutsche Reich, it's actually renamed to a Class 37. Deutsche Reich markings on it, very popular locomotive. Together with these cars, it would make for a very prototypical train. Here you see a beautiful picture set in scene with a little bit of photoshopping, I believe, but looks great, of that East German BR24, the Class 37. Interesting freight car set, also again for DR Era 4. 2 boxcars and a flat car, but this top boxcar should pique your interest because of the yellow door. And what they did is they transported essentially octane boosters, tetra-ethyl, in bottles in these cars. Very dangerous liquid. Of course, we no longer have the leaded fuel, or don't have much of it anymore, because I guess it's dangerous stuff. And what they did is they used old boxcars that they had to transport this. They would simply repaint the doors yellow to warn that it had the dangerous chemicals on board, put a little warning sticker on or label on the door, and then next to the door you'd have these instructions pertaining to the dangerous load. On one side it would be in German, interestingly enough. On the other side it would be in Russian. One of the warnings is, if you see stuff leaking from this car, keep everybody 50 meters away, just because of the dangerous gases. It's pretty funny. But they used all kinds of old cars for this, but would always paint the doors yellow. And if the cars would get damaged because of a spill or a leak, they would simply dispose of the cars and get other ones, I guess. Oh, and then we get to the sliding Tarp car. We're jumping to Era 5. Very typical in the DB Cargo Red. This particular car is a little bit of weathering, a little bit of dirt around. Very common car in Germany. Then we get to the Ludmilla. They got these from East Germany with the reunification, and very strong locomotives, very powerful. This still has that East German paint job, the dark red. And then interestingly enough, all they did was just put the DB logo on it initially. So these ran from maybe 94 to 90, 98, 99. And then slowly but surely they started repainting all these in the bright DB cargo red. So this is one of the early versions of the Ludmilla. Typically used for freight trains, and we have this great container transport car set that would go well with it, with 1, 2, 3, with a total of 6 cars. Some with double axles and 3 containers or 2 containers, and then of course the smaller double container cars with single axles. Then a couple of more of sliding Tarp car sets or cars, and one is just a regular one, and the other one has a print on it saying "Das ist grün," essentially saying how good rail transport is for the environment. This one is an interesting one. A former V200-1, a Class 221. It's now owned by SGL, which stands for Schienengüter Logistik, a German company, in a gray coloring. And this is the Toy Fair locomotive for 2021. And because we always attend the Toy Fair, we can sell these, but we can only take orders till the end of February of 2021. That's when I'm making this presentation. So limited edition Toy Fair locomotive, comes in a nice little wooden case, and this locomotive actually exists and would also be a perfect one to pull these freight cars. And then we have the Class 285 locomotive. This one is a private railroad, the Presnitz Valley Railroad, in their typical bright blue color, typical Era 6 diesel workhorse. Then we go on to Switzerland with the RE420, and in this paint scheme typically would pull the double-decker trains, as you can see. Very common locomotive, very popular model as well. Then we have the Boxcar, the sliding wall Boxcar. Last year we had the Tella, and this year we have the one that says Tella Kimberley from the Tella. It's a Swiss paper company. Then this says Austria, but it's 3 of the sliding wall boxcars. It's a set, and as you can see, the top one is Switzerland. This one is actually Sweden, and then the bottom one is Austria. These cars run all throughout Europe in this mix match, and so it really should say Europe, if nothing else. Great set to have, since you will see these cars in many different countries running like this. Then we do have for the Austrian railroads a car transport set, and this is just like the other car transporter. These cars run together with passenger trains to haul the vehicles off the people on the train. Then jumping to Era 5, we have this French sliding Tarp car set. It contains 3 cars for mineral water companies, Vittel, Evian, and Contrax. These cars have metal frames and are nice, long freight cars. Then from Poland, we get the freight car set. These cars with the very typical yellow-blue colors are seen all throughout Europe, and therefore can be used in many of your different trains. They put it here together with the Presnittal locomotive. And then for this year, again, we'll have an Easter car. We've had them now for the last 2 years. We stock these cars, so even though they are limited editions, you can probably still order previous years from us to get your series complete. And this year's comes in a Easter egg that you could hang as an ornament. Marklin brings out several building kits in their collection for Z-scalers, and this is made out of laser cut cardstock. It's a model of an old freight car. And what they did in Germany, if the cars could no longer run, often they would repurpose them as buildings along the track, alongside the track. Then last but not least, a set of vehicles. Again, you saw one of those tempo vehicles earlier, and this is a set of 8. You'll get 4 cars with as a delivery truck, if you will, as a van, and then 4 as a more pickup truck style in this set. And that concludes our little presentation of the Z-Scale new items for 2021. And our ordering, as of right now, we're speaking early February of 2021. Our ordering is open, our pre-ordering for the new items. And we'd hope to see your order on ajckits.com. Thanks much, and we'll talk to you next time.